Thank you very much. I would say any invitation from Tripura is like a command from my mother, because the name of my mother is Tripura Sundari, and Tripura Sundari Mata is the presiding deity of Tripura. Therefore, it is like homecoming to me to enjoy the bliss of a mother's love when I interact with you in any program initiated by ICFAI Tripura. I congratulate NJVI Center for Postgraduate Legal Research, ICFAI Law School, for having conceptualized this innovative program. I say innovative program because please remember, 21st century is an age of innovation and not a renovation. And therefore, the focus should be on innovation. And you're choosing the theme very aptly, changing dimensions of legal education in 21st century. Now, legal education is a part of a larger landscape of education. And the changing dimensions of education in 21st century are baffling. The paradigm shifts are mind-boggling. And unless you have the intelligence to adopt yourselves, as Darwin had warned us, we would become extinct like dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were very big, but they did not have the intelligence to adopt. Therefore, what are the changing dimensions of education in 21st century? And in post-COVID situation, I'll come to that later. But in order to appreciate that, I remember the fundamental lesson that was taught to me by my school teacher while teaching history. He said, the present is nothing but a culmination of the past. And as poet T.S. Eliot has said, time future and time past are perhaps present in time present. Therefore, if you would like to appreciate and comprehend the importance of present, you need to understand and appreciate what was past. And you need to visualize what is going to be in 21st century. So, in 5 minutes, I'll quickly trace the evolution of legal education in India post-1947, after India got liberated from the shackles of colonialism. I would demarcate it into 5 zones, 5 generations. The first generation of legal education began with before independence and before the Advocates Act 1961 came. From 1947 to 1961, when most of you were not born. In fact, I was born in 1954. So the scenario between 1947 and 1961 was you had all sorts of people working as wakils, pleaders, bar settler, advocates, and there was no systematic training in law colleges as such. People used to receive sanat by doing certain different things. Then that was the first generation. And in that first generation, legal education are entering the citadels of the bar and becoming a part of the administration of justice was mostly elitist in character. That was the reason why from 1947 to 1961, you find the domination of elitist groups, because legal education was available in few centers. Chennai, Kolkata, Delhi, Cuttack, Patna, Bombay, and therefore in that generation you had the domination of what we would call Bengali Bhadraloks in legal profession. You had the domination of Bombay Parsi group in legal profession. And the rank and file never used to dream about that. So in order to democratize legal education, the second generation began with the coming into force of the Advocates Act of 1961. And entrusting the responsibility of maintaining standards in not only legal profession, but also legal education to a democratically elected body called the Bar Council of India. And the Bar Council of India took up the cudgels in 1961 and started democratizing legal education. But the pendulum went to the other extreme. There was so much of democratization that you had all sorts of law colleges sprucing up everywhere. So much so, Mr. Shatlavard, in his typical humorous way, remarked that India now is having the dubious distinction of producing brilliant lawyers in spite of law colleges and not because of law colleges. He used to say, a C.K. Daftari, a Satlawad, a Nani Palkiwala is an exception to the street. Because most of the law schools are producing only half-baked lawyers. Because the institution themselves were half-baked. And you had part-time law colleges, you had evening law colleges, you had early morning law colleges. Name anything under the sun, you will find it in law colleges. And law colleges were mostly the parking spaces for the vehicles which could not be parked elsewhere. And pursuing legal education was a national pastime and hobby. Instead of a young person saying that I'm not doing anything, he used to just park his vehicle in law college for what it is worth. And Anil Devan, late lamented father of Shyam Devan, Anil Devan sir, who passed away last year, used to say, we the advocates of that generation were not even in demand in matrimonial market because nobody used to prefer us, he used to say. Because they used to look at us as unwanted babies. So from 1961 to 1988, there was democratic spread of legal education, which was very positive. But the pendulum swung to the other extreme because of not so much a focus on quality, but more focus on quantity. Legal education became a means not to pursue learning, but to acquire degrees. And all right-thinking persons applied their minds to that. And the Chief Justice of India, the judges of Supreme Court, judges of different high courts, primarily Bar Council of India, members of academic community and juries, they came together. And here, let me tell you, genius never comes in isolation. It is only through synergy and symbiosis that you have genius. And all these people came together and they conceptualized the idea of establishing an institution of excellence. And they first conceptualized the idea of switching over from 3-year LLB course to 5-year LLB course. And that happened around 1985, before the establishment of National Law School. Now here, an important point needs to be mentioned here. Most of the people think that 5-year legal education started with the establishment of Bangalore Law School. That is true enough, but not enough of the truth. The experiment called 5-year legal education was started first in Bangalore University, thanks to the vision of Professor C.B. Kotinho. Then an unlikely place called Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati, which started its 5-year program in its most reputed affiliated college, VR College of Law, one of whose distinguished alumnus is Professor Subbarao. And there was a third institution somewhere in Punjab, which started this 5-year program. And all these three came before the establishment of law schools. But it was the establishment of National Law School in 1988 in Bangalore that initiated what we call the third generation of legal education. Because the 5-year legal education was crystallized and cemented with the establishment of National Law School in Bangalore in 1980. Because, and it was the baby of the Bar Council of India. And it was sponsored by the Bar Council of India. Therefore, due credit must be given to Bar Council of India for having conceptualized a revolutionary idea. And this Bangalore National Law School started with a bang. And people thought that it is an experiment which started with a bang but would end with a whimper. And before it is too soon, it will fade away. And people were singing obituaries about National Law School Bangalore. But the courage, conviction, and commitment, the devotion, dedication, and determination of the personnel involved in the first generation of National Law School of India, University Bangalore, proved the world wrong. And it proved that in 10 years, Bangalore National Law School could achieve what IITs took 3 decades to achieve. What IIMs took more than 2 decades to achieve. And from 1988 to 1998, it was the only law school. And when it became a byword for excellence, the second law school was established in Hyderabad in 1998. And today you have more than 24 law schools, all created by the statutes of the state governments. So 1988, which marked the baptism of national law schools, is the third generation of legal education now. But then, when National Law School was established, please remember, there was no globalization. It was 1988 that National Law School of India University was established. And 1993, we had globalization. But by the time the first batch from National Law School of India University, Bangalore, walking from the university to universe, you had globalization. And National Law School was impacted by the forces of globalization. And if that was the starting point of the third generation in 1988, for about 25 years, National Law School India University movement proved to the world that they have become bywords for excellence. But the criticism against that institution was, against national law schools, was they have started producing elitist lawyers rather than producing socially engineered lawyers. And when that criticism, added with the criticism that national law schools were not inclusive in character, and students studying from metropolitan cities in public schools had a distinct advantage in gaining access to national law schools, came a brilliant young man who is an alumnus of National Law School, Bangalore, whom unfortunately destiny has snatched away from our midst. As they say, those whom God's love die young. I'm referring to one and only Shamnath Bashir. Now, Shamnath Bashir came with the idea of increasing diversity in access to national law schools and in admission to national law schools. That I would mark as the fourth generation of national law schools or legal education in India. So the first generation was 1947 to 61, when it was very elitist. Second generation was coming into force of Advocates Act and Bar Council of India being given the responsibility for democratizing legal education. And the third generation is the birth of national law schools in 1988 and popularizing 5-year law courses. Then the fourth generation is Shamnath Bashir's idea. And today I'm telling you with a sense of pride and satisfaction, because I was, after Shamnath Bashir's brilliant idea, was there in National Law School of India University, Bangalore for more than 6 years. And thanks to him, the access to National Law School of India University had been made more open. And out of the 80 students that are admitted in Bangalore, we have more than 60 who come from small towns, who come from semi-urban areas, who come from middle class and lower middle class families. Earlier, it was not the case. So that was the fourth generation. And the fifth generation is the post-COVID situation in legal education. And here I would say the post-COVID world is a panic-driven one that has left no institution or no appraisal process untouched. But we should not get panicky. As Winston Churchill said, a successful person always sees an opportunity in a calamity. Only an unsuccessful person finds a calamity in an opportunity. And human beings have been given the wherewithal by the Almighty to adopt themselves. So what are the opportunities that we can find here? And let me tell you, when you look at the 21st century changing dimensions of legal education, though I focused for a greater part on national law schools, in legal education, national law schools are only islands of excellence. Please remember that. And a very important role is played by two other groups. The second group is private institutions, which are catering to the needs of larger clientele. In that, I would say a symbiosis, an ICFI. I congratulate ICFI for that. Now, for which, yes, they are playing an important role. And the third stream is unseen and unheard law colleges all over the country, catering to the needs of rural segments, which produce advocates primarily who practice it in the trial courts. I will not use the word lower court, because no court is lower and no court is higher. All courts are of the same importance. In the trial court, 99% of the litigation takes place in the trial courts. And most of the law schools or law colleges situated in mufsil areas, they take care, situated in semi-urban areas, they take care, and 90% of people come from there. Therefore, when you speak about the changing dimensions, don't start with national law schools and end there. Because national law schools, they are neither the beginning nor the end of the legal education. They provide an important fulcrum, a bystander for excellence. We have to move beyond that. Therefore, when you look at contours, you cannot adopt a formula like one shoe fits all sizes. Now, the changing dimensions in national law school legal education, they are something different from the changing dimensions in ICFI and other schools. And they are different totally from changing dimensions in a college situated in a tribal area in Chhattisgarh, where a student pursuing legal education is required to study more about the tribal laws. Remember, schedules relating to tribals in the Constitution of India, land laws, acquisition, because these are his bread and butter issues. But when you look at the segments in national law school and urban areas, a very interesting situation you find is today's students, they face stress in modern life. And as teachers, you have to take cognizance of the stress. Now, what are the factors that are responsible for this stress of the students? And for the stress of most of the teachers also, in that matter. See, we become stressful because we engage more with technology and less with people. A teacher must remember, technology is only an aid to a teacher and not a substitute for a teacher. Because nobody can substitute the radiance and warmth of a teacher in the classroom. But unfortunately, we engage more ourselves with technology because we have become victims of what is called the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, which is a systems revolution, unlike the first three revolutions, which are product revolutions, remember, has introduced the concept of robot and artificial intelligence, and there has been a sophisticated brainwashing technique, which has made us susceptible to that. But a school student opened my mind when he said, "Sir, somewhere I read artificial intelligence means an attempt to mechanize human thoughts." Is the simplest meaning of artificial intelligence. But then he asked me a question, can all human thoughts be mechanized? It's impossible to mechanize all human thoughts. Therefore, when you are making use of artificial intelligence, when you are making use of robots, when you are making use of other technological gadgets, don't dehumanize yourself in the classroom. That's very, very important. Because don't dehumanize you. Don't become a robot. Because robot can replicate a human brain, but a robot cannot replicate a human heart, which is full of compassion. A robot cannot replicate a human soul, which is always creative. So passion and compassion you find in heart and soul, but not in the brain. Therefore, a teacher in the 21st century must take care to see that technological gadgets are only useful servants, but dangerous and tyrannical masters. Therefore, let us engage ourselves with technology. See, ICT is the most important invention after the printing press for the cause of the education sector. There is no doubt about it. But that ICT can only be a supplement and not a substitute for what takes place actually in the classroom. Therefore, one of the stressful factors in the modern times is that because you engage more with technology and less with human beings. And the second stressful factor is when you look at the students in the classroom, remember, you must have heard about millennial children, X generation, Y generation, Z generation, so many things. But one thing that sums up is all these youngsters, including some young teachers, I was also young like that, they're impatient while doing tasks. For this is a generation looking for instant gratification. You think that at the touch of a button, everything will be solved. And instantly you'll get everything. Life is not like that. So there is no instant gratification in the pursuit of learning. Therefore, a teacher in the classroom must train the minds in such a way, especially in the realm of legal education. Because remember, law is a means which we have invented to achieve a goal called justice, to achieve a goal called truth. And you must impress upon the student that the legal profession is the only profession to find a place in the Constitution of India. That means legal education enables you to fulfill the goals of the Constitution. And one of the most important goals of the Constitution, I would say, they are not mentioned in the preamble, but they are mentioned in the fundamental duties. One duty says to strive towards excellence in your sphere of activity, both individually and collectively, so that the nation rises constantly in the levels of achievement. As Jawaharlal Nehru long ago said, who cares whether you live or die if India dies? Who dies if India lives, and who lives if India dies? Therefore, in the fundamental duties, when it said excellence is the goal, what type of excellence? Excellence in the product at any cost. That means you cut, paste, plagiarize, write something, get a gold medal. Is it excellence? Whom are you cheating? Ask the fundamental question to yourself. Are you cheating yourself? Are you cheating your parents? Ultimately, the answer comes in you are cheating yourself. Therefore, when a teacher is there in the classroom, the major role of a teacher is to inculcate those values so that it is not only an excellent product that comes out of the university, but an excellent human being. Please remember, when fundamental duties spoke about excellence, it is not mere excellence in the product. Because as people have said very wisely, academic excellence without human excellence is disastrous. And legal education is one education which provides you the wherewithal to foster the culture of excellence. And these days you find that the socio-cultural fabric is an underlying stress because of collapse of certain institutions, like supporting institutions like joint family and others. And that socio-cultural fabric, a student must find in the classroom. Therefore, this generation is impatient, and this generation focuses more on immediate success. Immediate success means end and not the means. But what is the objective of education? The objective of education is to make you a complete human being. I keep on always saying wherever I go, objective of education is not information, but formation. Formation of a complete human being. That's the reason why T.S. Eliot, the wonderful poet, said, where is the knowledge we have lost in information? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? And where is the life we have lost in living? So our classroom should not be meant to provide means for living. Our classroom should be meant to provide means for life. Our classroom should be meant to provide means to acquire wisdom. And the first step in education is information. But it should not stop there. Now, from information, you must move to knowledge. And from knowledge, you must move to wisdom. Therefore, in the changing contours of legal education also, Remember, if the focus is on wisdom and if it can be handled well, and if you can make students enjoy the understand the meaning of life. Because I found most of the students coming from urban places, metropolitan areas, they see that there is no meaning in life. They look jaded. At the young age of 20, 21, they look dispirited. All because they are not able to connect with the world. And added to that, in COVID, we have what is called social distancing. Remember always, human beings believe in social proximity and not social distancing. But how to get social proximity in the days of social distancing is a challenge for the teacher in the classroom. You must enable the students to develop a sense of design of togetherness, maintain social communication in spite of physical distances, and positive and continuous communication is the key to the end of misery of anxiety. Because remember, every young person is unique. As Abdul Kalam says in his book, Wings of Fire, every young person has that fire in him, that divine fire. There is nothing like a genius, nothing like an intelligent man. It is for the teacher to stoke the fire and to give wings to that fire. And therefore, the responsibility of a teacher is to make students to have reverence for life. With this, I will now move to the real role of a teacher and importance of this faculty development program. I congratulate Ishita and ICFI for having concepted this idea, because teachers should have three qualities. Number one, they must be lifelong learners. They must be frontline researchers. Number two. And number three, they must be eternal problem solvers. Lifelong learners, frontline researchers, and eternal problem solvers. And faculty development program is a means. Because I remember a very important program that I attended in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Wherever I go, I share this experience. And Jawaharlal Nehru University, when I attended a meeting where a teacher was being felicitated, when Sitaram Yechuri was the president, okay, there was a big banner. The meeting was organized to felicitate a teacher who got a prize equivalent to a Nobel Prize in history. Because history doesn't have Nobel Prize. Only in limited subjects you have Nobel Prize. And that professor got a prize from Central Europe, and that professor belongs to Jawaharlal Nehru University. He was being felicitated. And I entered the hall. I was hardly 21 years old then, 22. And I saw a banner. Half of it was covered and half of it was open. The upper half was open. And it said, "We don't want learned teachers." The lower half was covered. I was surprised at a function organized to felicitate teacher who got a prize, award equivalent to Nobel Prize. The JNU people had the gumption to come out with a banner, "We don't want learned teachers." But, okay. But I come by curiosity. I knew JNU people would always have a secret up their sleeve. The meeting started. Like introduction, ritualistic items, okay, all those things were over. Then the professor was about to be felicitated. He was asked to take his special seat. Then they removed the lower post also. The entire banner I read, "This is very important for faculty development program. We don't want learned teachers. What we want is learning teachers." And our history teacher is the best example of a learning teacher. My young friends, please remember in life three things. Any achievement becomes meaningless once you achieve it. First principle. Any achievement becomes meaningless once you achieve it. The second principle is, today's knowledge is tomorrow's ignorance. So you can't afford to live on your past. And therefore, in teaching profession, what that banner said was, when somebody refers to you as a learned teacher, please don't take it as a compliment. That means you belong to the past, sir. This is what Justice Krishna said in a conference of judges. He said, in his typical humorous way, everywhere judges find that they will be referred as learned judges, isn't it? When we invite a judge also, we say learned judge. Krishna was telling that is the worst compliment that can be paid. A learned judge means they are saying, you old fellow, you are fossilized. Your knowledge has become anachronistic. You are demonetized. And the fundamental principle in economics is good coins drive bad coins out of use. And therefore, you outlived your utility. The sooner you pack up and go away, the better it would be for the cause of the institution. So he said, what we want is learning judges and not learning judges. The same metaphor can be extended here. What we want today is learning teachers and not learning teachers. And the best way of ensuring a learning teacher is a faculty development program. And faculty means, please remember, an elementary definition of character, which I read while preparing for a debate competition in my school-going days, I remember. Character means strong development and striking display of mental and moral faculties. Strong development and striking display of mental and moral faculties. A teacher is supposed to have a strong development, first of intellectual equipment, but then he must be a role model human being. That's what you mean by faculty development. Because for a young student in the classroom, remember when your little daughter goes to school, she comes back from the school, and if you say something, she will immediately say, no, mama, my teacher has said that she is like. For her, mother is important, but teacher is goddess. That means right from day one, we are inculcated a culture where we believe that teacher is a paragon of virtue and the teacher is an intellectual powerhouse of high voltage. And therefore, we should not violate the sanctity of the classroom. Please remember that. We should not let down the younger generation. That would happen when you have strong development of moral faculties. And therefore, faculty development program must focus on intellectual abilities as well as development of character from within. And I'm sure this 5-day program will be the step in the right direction with the blessings of Tripura Sundari Mata. Okay, which will make the 21st century hopes of legal education. See, we belong to the past. You are the future. Okay. We are required to hand over the baton to you. And I'm sure this program will be a stepping stone in that direction. And please permit me to leave the meeting at this time because I have another webinar at 11:30 and I must overcome those technical glitches there because, we are still people with the 20th century mindset. And the teacher should remember my last sentence in this will be, for 21st century problems, you can have solutions not with the 20th century mindset and 19th century working tools. You must get rid of the caveman mentality. Okay, then you will be able to find it. And there is nothing depressing with COVID, in my opinion, at all. This is a test given to us by nature to test how powerful are the shock absorbers in our body. And the primary job of a teacher is to instill those shock absorbers of resilience in the minds and the bodies of the students. God bless you all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you much.